everyone, for inviting me here today. So last week you heard about one of the largest and perhaps the most glamorous object in our collection, the howdah. And today we'll be looking at its polar opposite, at a cup that is tiny in size, it's about this big, very simply decorated, and like many of you, one of my most favorite objects in the collection. In fact, there's been ongoing exchange with Pedro for the last several months about who likes it more. And I think we can go 50-50 on it. So the little jade cup poses a challenge, I think, for a lot of tours and docents because of its size and where it is located right now in the galleries. But it is one of the most remarkable pieces in our West Asia and South Asia collections, and hopefully by the end of this talk you will agree with me. It is beautiful, elegant in shape and color, masterful in its calligraphic decoration, and very impressive for the technical skills of its makers. The cup is historically important. It was the personal possession of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, and it bears names of two of its royal owners, a Timurid prince Alauddin and the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. Both dynasties, the Mughals and the Timurids, were renowned as connoisseurs of art and very impressive patrons. And finally, the object is rare. There is no other known object with the names of these two particular individuals. And it's among a relatively small group of inscribed Mughal jade objects. And, excuse me, and one of the two white jade objects from the Timurid period. So we're lucky to have this in our collection, and I'm guessing that you already have a sense of the deceptive simplicity of this object and how big the scope can be. So for this talk today, I'm going to focus it on a few different talking points. One, we'll start out by looking at the cup itself, its materiality and physical qualities. Then to its two patrons, Alauddin and Jahangir. Third, I'll move back a little bit and look at the Timurid and Mughal artistic production and art patronage. And after the break, we'll take a look at the Mughal practice of collecting Timurid objects and why that mattered to them. And finally, we'll return to the cup itself and take a look at its function. So the scope of the talk today will, extend over a geographic scope that focuses on the one hand on Eastern Iran. Eastern Iran in the Timurid Empire around the regions of Herat and Samarkand, which are today respectively in Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. And secondly, to North India, to the Mughal Empire. And in chronological scope, we'll be looking at the 15th century for the Timurid material, and then the early 16th century for the Mughal things. So let's turn to, perfect, thank you. So jade. Jade is the generic term used for two different materials, nephrite and jadeite. Both are very hard and hard minerals, and for the most part, what we are looking at is nephrite, which is on a hardness density of 6.5 on a scale of 10 on the Mohs scale, and goes from opaque in its color to assuming some beautiful translucencies. It ranges in color across a broad range from almost black to a milky white, but the broadest range is found in the shades of green, which often include mottles and other types of inclusions, and these two are objects that you might be familiar with. The Persian term, actually I'll stop here. The Persian term for jade was yashb or yashm, and the term was used in historical sources not only to describe jade or nephrite, but also for jasper, and which is green in color as well, and it sometimes creates ambiguity in historical records. The technique of working jade, at least when you read texts on Islamic art, calls it jade carving. But jade is too hard to be carved, as in stoneworking, sculptural. And instead, it is used, it is worked with a variety of tools, and the surface is abraded with lathes and bores and drills of other types, using an abrasive slurry to create the friction to work the material. We have very little information that is from Mughal sources, or for that matter, Timurid sources that talk about the working of jade. But what we do have is an occasional image like this from a 17th century album page, as well as other 19th century examples of a lapidary or gem worker's techniques. And the tools and the methods for these two crafts are overlapping. So you can see they're fairly simple tools. There's a bow lathe here, and some examples of that, a boring tool. And, and so there's a lathe that cuts the core of the material, an engraving point or cutting wheel that is used for engraving the inscriptions and cutting designs, a drill point used for boring holes, and then a grinding plate used for shaping and polishing. And it's really remarkable, again, to think of the craftsmen and the possibilities that lie and the skills that they need to transform these big chunks of stone into delicate objects that are richly decorated with patterns and made into very elegant shapes with thin walls that allow for the materiality and translucency and light of the material to come forth. So in the Islamic world, as in China, the primary sources of jade, or for nephrite, come from the Tarim Basin region in Central Asia, southern Central Asia, from the regions of Khotan and Kashgar. And here you see relatively where they are close in relation to Samarkand and Delhi as well. The jade is mined from beds of the Yarkand and Khotan rivers, and most of the jade must have been transported over overland routes. So here we have them, and these various routes that have been in place since antiquity, the Silk Road, but also sea routes that would have allowed for the transportation of the material across very extensive distances. Khotan was an independent kingdom until the 10th century, when it was conquered by the Turks who were newly converted to Islam. And from then on, it became part of the greater Islamic world and was ruled by a succession of Turkic dynasties. By the 13th century, it had become part of the Mongol kingdom and was under the rule of the Khanate of the Chagatai. Chagatai Khan was the second son of Genghis Khan, and the region became known as Mughalistan, which is distinct from Mughal India of the 16th century. And in the 15th century, it came under the rule of, or not direct rule, but under the control of the Timurids, which probably explains one of the reasons why we see a lot of jade work emerging from the 15th century in eastern Iran. In the Mughal period, Emperor Akbar, who was our protagonist Jahangir's father, had established very good relations with one Khwaja Moin, who was the overseer of the main jade-bearing river in Kashgar. And the Khwaja's visit to the Mughal emperor's court in 1563 has been recorded in various historical sources. And one of the things that is also reported is that the Khwaja came bearing gifts of rare merchandise. And this rare merchandise, no doubt, included jade. Nearly a century later, in the 1660s, the French traveler Bernier reported that an embassy from Greater Tibet brought to the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, brought to the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb valuable gifts that included a block of jade. And Bernier further mentions that it was of extraordinary size and therefore very precious. So these reports reflect an ongoing series of exchanges. We don't know how frequent they were or what quantities of jade they brought, but these were not singular occurrences, and there was an exchange of the material. Nonetheless, jade was an expensive and rare commodity, at least even during Jahangir's time. And it was owned only by the emperor and very high-ranking officials of the court. Oh, sorry. If you read books on Islamic art, one of the first things they'll say is that, in the context of jade, that there is little to no jade carving that survives or is known until the Timurid period in the 15th century. But recent work by the scholars Manuel Keen and Suran Milikian Shirvani have shown that there was indeed a jade working tradition in Iran prior to the 15th century. What you see here are just some examples that range in date from the 1st century AD and all the way up to the 13th century. So while it's not a mass of material that is known, there is enough that survives to suggest that there has been an ongoing tradition of working jade in Eastern Iran, at least. In Iran, as in other cultures, jade was valued for its talismanic properties and as an auspicious material. It was said to bring victory to all those who owned it, and also reputed to be an antidote to poison. And a belief that is supported in a Jahangiri inscription on a cup, a dated cup, that calls the cup Padzeher, or antidote to poison. So it has all these various symbolisms which we see in other cultures as well, and those same types of ideas are echoed in the Islamic culture as well. So let's return to our cup and take a look at its material and physicality. So as I said, it's tiny, and I'm sure many of you know that from seeing it in the galleries. Yet, so it's almost nearly cylindrical in size, with sides that taper inward slightly towards the top, a very low foot. It's milky white in color, but has fairly thick walls, so it's not as translucent as other types of objects, even upstairs, can be. It's very simply decorated with primarily inscriptions, and then 2 bands of leafy scrolls that are above and below, and then a design that is on the bottom, which are then defined by thinly incised lines. So the main design element on this cup are the 2 inscriptions, which are really a skill and a testament to the skill of their makers. They're both very elegantly carved in beautiful script and easily readable. So our photographer just did some amazing stitching job with still photos, because it was a real challenge to actually photograph this object. I didn't realize it until I saw it in the photo studio earlier this week. But because the Jahangiri inscription, which is up on the rim, is almost impossible to see without magnification. I knew it was there. He asked me where it was, and I still couldn't see it until I got a loupe to look at it. So we'll take another look at that later, but the 2 inscriptions work really nicely with each other. So the inscription that occupies the main body starts from here, and it reads, "The Sultan, son of the Sultan, Alauddollah Bahadur Khan, ordered the completion of this casket. May God perpetuate his kingdom." The inscription is written pretty much entirely in Arabic, with the last phrase, "May God perpetuate his kingdom," or a variation of it, which is in Persian. And the script is bold, it's large, it's in the Rika or Sula script, and and occupies the whole body in a continuous circle. So who's Alauddollah? He was the son of Baisungur, and I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of Alauddollah, so this is his father, Baisungur. And he was the great-grandson of Emperor Timur, Amir Sultan Timur, better known in the Western world as Tamerlane, and one of the greatest conquerors that history has known. I'll get back to Timur and to the Timurids slightly later on, but for the moment, let's stay with Alauddollah. Very little is known about him in historical record. Whatever his achievements may have been completely overshadowed by that of his very illustrious father and his uncles and then grandfather and great-grandfather. But Alauddollah was the governor of, at first, of regions southeast of the Caspian Sea, and then later in Herat from 1446. After his grandfather Shahrukh died in 1447, Alauddollah was backed by his grandmother, Gohar Shad, who was the most important and influential Timurid royal women of her time. And he briefly occupied the throne at the city of Herat in 1447. But then he was booted out of there by his uncle Ulugh Beg in 1449. And so he disappears pretty much from the record. Alauddollah disappears from the record, except for one note in by a Timurid historian who says that he, after he was removed from Herat, he just wandered around for the next 13 years of his life. So this cup must have very likely, it's not dated, but very likely must have been made between the period 1447 and 1449 for the 2 years that Alauddollah was on the throne. Our next inscription, which is up here, is in the form of a two-beti, or a two-couplet Persian poem, which translates to, "This life-sustaining jade casket belongs to Jahangir Shah, son of Akbar Shah. For as long as the casket of heaven or the celestial sphere revolves, may the world remember Jahangir Khan." Each of these lines of the couplet are enclosed within cartouches, and so you can, I don't know if you can see this, but they're right here and here. They mark the start and end of each of these lines. This is written in very elegant and delicate Nastaliq script, but very, very precisely. And so it must have been the work of a master calligrapher who would have also been a master gem carver, because it's not the kind of thing in terms of its scale, its precision, and its elegance that would have been easily transferable from the calligrapher writing it out on paper and passing it on to the gem worker's workshop. So the scholar Malikin Sherwani suggests that that this was the work of a Persian poet, a calligrapher, and a gem carver by the name of Saida-e Gilani, who was active at Jahangir's court, greatly admired by the emperor for his skills as a poet, as a calligrapher, as well as a master jeweler. And this Gilani was also appointed at the head of the goldsmith's workshop at the imperial court, and was given the title of Bi Badal Khan, or one who cannot be replaced, by Emperor Jahangir. So we don't know exactly who the calligrapher was, who the craftsman was, but this argument is quite persuasive. The inscription is also not dated. And what we don't know is when Jahangir got the cup in his possession or when he had it inscribed. There are other cups and other vessels that are recorded as being received as gifts by him in his memoirs, the Tuzuk-i Jahangiri. But this cup does not show up in those records. So it is possible that he inherited this from his father's treasury. So here is Jahangir, who was related to the Mughal, to the Timurids and to Alauddin by descent from another one of the Timurid princes or the sons of Timur. But by the time he gets to Alauddin, the family relationship becomes slightly distant. But as I will talk about in the second half of this talk, it's a distinction that doesn't matter much in the grand scheme. Jahangir, here's a painting of the birth of Jahangir. Here's the baby Jahangir, his little cradle here. Was born Prince Salim to the third Mughal Emperor Akbar. And when he came to the throne, he took on the title Jahangir, or World Caesar, and was renowned as a very sophisticated patron of the arts. Arts across media, was known for a love of highly refined, sophisticated, elegant, courtly objects that included a whole range of media. And he presided over a very wealthy, prosperous, and cosmopolitan court. Jahangir was also well known for being a connoisseur of painting, and he is reputed to have been able to tell exactly the hand of which artist was in which part of a painting just based on looking at the work. And in 1600, he rebelled against his father and set himself up as an independent ruler in Allahabad, nearby the royal capital. And as part of his independence, he set up a he set up a painting studio in which he employed some of the best artists of his father's atelier. And then when he came back and took on the throne officially in 1605, he is said to have fired a lot of the artists who were employed at Akbar's studio, and that studio boasted about over 100 painters, and Jahangir kept only the best. So he is very well known for a very individual taste in painting, and was supported artists such as Mansour, who was famed for his bird and animal studies, and was very interested in realistic or naturalistic artwork. This is one of his lead officials who was on his deathbed, and Jahangir sent an artist to capture that moment. Aside from paintings and other types of luxury objects, jades were a part of Jahangir's patronage. And after Akbar's death in 1605, when uncarved jade was stored in Mughal treasuries, and the East India representative to the Mughal court, one William Hawkins, reports that in 1609, 4 years after his accession to the throne, Jahangir's treasury held 55 pounds of uncut jade from Cathay, or China. And he further mentions that there were 500 drinking cups, of which 50 were made of precious and semi-precious stones. stones such as rubies, emeralds, jade, and turquoise. So many of these objects must have been in the royal treasury, and then these, for example, this cup and the inkwell were made for Jahangir, and both include inscriptions with his name on it. And then we have our little cup that was probably part of, again, that was part of Jahangir's possessions. So now I'm going to step back a little bit and take a look at the art patronage and just a broader contextual background of who were the Timurids and who were the Mughals, and the worlds within which objects like the Jade Cup functioned. So Timur, known, as I said, Tamerlane, he's called that because in Persian sources he was referred to as Timur-e-Lang, or the lame one, after a boyhood injury. Anyhow, he was a member of the Barlas Turkic nomadic tribe of Central Asia, who was, because of his charismatic personality and brilliant political abilities, was able to corral, like Genghis Khan, the nomadic tribes who helped him come to power. In 1370, Timur had occupied the throne at Samarkand, and this is a painting showing the accession of Timur, but made nearly 50 years after his death. So with the capital at Samarkand, Timur succeeded in occupying a very vast territory that had previously been held by several independent dynasties. And his reach went as far to what is modern Iraq, tried to get into Damascus and to Syria, or tried to get into Ottoman Turkey, did not succeed very well. Also made his way to Delhi in 1398, but did not stay, and eventually died on 1404 on his way to a campaign in China. Western sources mostly recognize Timur as being a bloodthirsty warrior. Well, that is part of it, like for any major conqueror. And here's a painting showing Timur overseeing a battle. But they were also, Timur and his successors were amongst the most brilliant patrons of art and culture. And master builders, here we're seeing the tomb of Timur, the Gur-Emir in Samarkand. For the Timurids, for Timur himself and for subsequent descendants, as well as what happens to the Mughals in India, legitimation was a big issue. Just occupying territory by force was not enough to really garner the loyalty of all his people. And there were many different ways in which Timur and his successors succeeded in that. And one of the things that that became a programmatic effort was to ally themselves to the Mongols, especially to the Chaghatay Khanate of the Mongols. And that was done in various ways by adopting the code Yasa of Genghis Khan as part of administrative systems, as well as many other administrative policies that continued or took on from a already established Mongol system. By marrying into and with Chaghatay princesses. So not only Timur, but each of his sons were married to Mongol princesses. And another very forward-thinking, I suppose, aspect of this was the recognition that art and culture was another way to gain credibility, gain legitimation, and gain greater support. And so the Timurids became one of the most impressive patrons of learning, of culture, and of art. But I kind of went ahead of myself and forgot to show this slide. But this is the cenotaph of Timur, which was made by his grandson Ulugh Beg, of a huge chunk of green jade. And on it are extensive inscriptions on the sides, on the top, and on these inscriptions there is a genealogy that has been created for Timur that not only connects him to the Mongols, but also, interestingly, to the Prophet's Prophet's cousin Ali, who's the head of the Shiite community. So in these two different ways, or in these multiple ways, the Timurids forged a new sense of self, a new sense of identity, which was carried forth in some of the most spectacular artworks produced for this dynasty. They supported a great constellation of literati at the court that ranged from major artists such as Behzad, and I'll show you some images of that, poets such as Jami, Ali Shernevai, Hatifi, Ulugh Beg, as well as other rulers were very interested and active in the sciences, especially astronomy, and Ulugh Beg constructs a big observatory in Samarkand, as well as other madrasas and schools of learning. And even though Timurid political power sort of started to decline after the death of Timur, for another century, the cultural cachet of the Timurids was such that they were known as the most sophisticated of the ruling houses, and whose art and artists were greatly emulated by the Safavids in Iran, the Ottomans in Turkey, and the Mughals in India. So what you're seeing here in the previous slide is, again, some remarkable paintings by the artist Behzad, who was supposed to, who's reputed for having brought a fresh vision to Persian painting by including naturalism and by including elements from everyday life. Calligraphers such as Sultan Ali Mashhadi and were working along with artists in a workshop setting and creating magnificent manuscripts. This one, I mean, the picture really doesn't do justice to it, but this work by Mir Ali Haravi, all the calligraphy is in the technique called decoupage. The letters are all cut out, and the colors, what you see, are the paper that is behind the cut-out letters. So the precision, the elegance is just unbelievable. So one of the ways in which the Timurid artistic legacy was transmitted and was perpetuated was by the setting up of very elaborate kitabkhane, or workshops, book workshops. And at these, artists, calligraphers, and bookmakers and illuminators all worked together to create designs that were also then employed by craftsmen in other working in other media. So, for example, the kind of detailed illumination, the division of spaces within these geometric yet naturalistic forms, use of bends filled with ornament, are the types of elements that we see in this fantastic wooden box made for Ulugh Beg, or metalwork, and then relationships between metalwork and other types of media. This is perhaps one of the most famous objects currently in the collection of the Gulbenkian in Lisbon, which is a white jade cup, a jug made for Ulugh Beg and later owned by the Mughal emperors, and I'll come back to this later. But you can see sort of the relationships that worked between different specialties of craftsmanship. The Timurids also presided over a very cosmopolitan court. There were embassies, European embassies passing through the Timurid court, as well as a series of embassies with the Ming court in China, with whom there was a love-hate relationship. But the Timurids had a great interest and fascination for Chinese art, and which was then adapted and translated into Persianate forms. And so we see blue and white ceramics, for example, that were made in the Timurid world, but deriving from Chinese examples. Paintings that very distantly relate to elements of Chinese art. You see that in the facial types. Costumes were with these cloud collars and other embroidered elements. And here we see more ceramics, blue and whites, that were used. This is one of the most stunning works. It is a page from the horoscope made for one of the grandsons of Timur. It's just absolutely spectacular. How am I doing with time? Okay. So I'll now turn to the Mughals, and then we'll take a break. So the Mughals were a dynasty who in 1525-26 made their way from Central Asia to India and remained in power until 1858 when India became a colony of the British Empire. So it was a very long-lived dynasty. But the founder of the dynasty, Babur, was a Timurid prince, and you'll see that in the next slide, whose family's fortunes had dwindled by the time he came of age, and he was ruled over a tiny territory around here in Farghana Valley. And Babur was descended from another one of Timur's sons, and you see that line all the way down. He is fourth generation removed. And he comes to India looking for new fortunes and basically following the path of his ancestors, Timur, who had come to invade Delhi in 1398. And so nearly 150 years later, when Babur is looking for a new kingdom, a new home place, he decides to go to India. If, like any startup, Babur's career in India was filled with establishing himself, occupying territory, and unfortunately was very short-lived. He died 4 years after he got to India, and so did not have much time to really consolidate or establish himself. His son Humayun was left with a very fragile empire and faced a great deal of resistance from all sides, from his many other brothers as well as from the Afghans. And Humayun was eventually sent to exile, and he was in Iran for 15 years under the patronage of the Safavid Shah Tahmasp, and returned to India in 1555, only to die in 1556. So the task of building and consolidating the empire was left to the third generation, the Emperor Akbar, who we see here presiding over his court. Akbar was the master builder of the Mughal dynasty, a very able administrator, a very astute politician, a very dynamic individual with intellectually curious, and a very active patron of the arts. And in the course of a 50-year rule, Akbar built the foundations of a massive and prosperous empire which although lost a big chunk of its wealth and glory within 75 years of its death, it still continued for another 200 years until 1858. So here is a painting showing one of the many battles of Akbar's victories that are recorded in the Akbarnama, or the history of Akbar. The likes of Akbar faced a very challenging task, back again to the thorny issue of legitimation, because the Mughals were newcomers to India. India had already a very long established Muslim presence in North India that goes back to the 11th century. And not only that, but very powerful independent Indian kingdoms, especially the Rajputs in North India and several other kingdoms in eastern and southern India that had a hold. So here we see the territorial expanse. All the yellow parts were the conquests of Akbar in a 50-year span. So again, how do you establish credibility? How do you establish the authority to rule? Because simple power and brute force is never the answer. And we see, again, as it did for the Timurids, this type of thing unfolding for the Mughals as well. The cult of personality became a big thing, and Akbar is shown in the Akbarnama paintings in many different phases, many different guises, many different aspects. Here he is taming a wild elephant, and here he is giving free food at a soup kitchen at a shrine, a Sufi shrine. And here he is presiding over intellectual and religious debates at the court. So these are just some of the ways in which a multifaceted personality is expressed, and which gains, again, greater support from all those who surround him. Sorry for the gritty images. But Akbar also ruled over a very cosmopolitan court, and because of his intellectual interest in a whole range of different subjects, what we also see is ways in which the known world is incorporated and encompassed within the Mughal sphere. And evidence for that, aside from historical sources, survive in things like this painting of the Harivamsha, or the life of Vishnu, that was written in Persian and then illustrated, or another Persian text which is on the life of Christ. To the point that by the time we come to the grandson of Akbar, so Shah Jahan, who's the son of Jahangir, and Shah Jahan is the builder of the Taj Mahal, we see a very prosperous, a very well-established and secure image of the kingdom and of the dynasty. And they continue to remain really superb patrons of the art, and this is a fantastic, beautiful cup of white jade made for Shah Jahan. So I think with that, let's take a break and we'll come back to